Captain Brian Bowling, and I am the Formation Europe Chaplain for Northern Europe. I'm really glad you're able to join me today. Today, we're going to talk about post-traumatic growth. Now, you may not have heard that term as of yet. It's a relatively new field of study, but it kind of is the obverse to post-traumatic stress. And what that really means is that instead of having a situation where one can become debilitated by that experience, instead, we find a way to grow and find something positive that comes out of that experience. Now, some of the initial studies for this began right after the Holocaust, after the Second World War. Researchers were fascinated why two individuals, for example, could have experienced something quite similar, and yet one came out of that situation transformed in a, let's say, negative way, in a less than positive way, optimal. They might have been someone who was very spiritual before, and they weren't anymore. They lost faith in humanity. Their trust was broken, as I'm sure you can imagine. But others came out of that experience with a new, renewed lease on life, with a sense of they had a mission to tell their story, that they had a goal to renew and reinvigorate their essence as a human being moving forward into the future, and therefore had a more optimistic outlook for the future. And so researchers were really fascinated by this difference between these two almost polar opposites, if you will. And then further study was done later in the US military following Vietnam, when veterans returned in the 70s. So post-traumatic growth, if I use 4 words to describe it, would be hope, growth, support, and resiliency. And it's kind of this way of looking at things. Now I mentioned resiliency, and you've probably heard resiliency a lot, particularly in the military networks these past little while. And that's really the ability to bounce back. It's kind of like a flexibility or a go with the flow sort of attitude, so that one can come back to their center point of existence relatively quickly. But post-traumatic growth refers to what can happen when someone has difficulty bouncing back. It's an experience of a traumatic event that changes one's life. It changes one's core beliefs. It endures that struggle that we go through in life, and then ultimately finds a path of personal growth, because their center of gravity, their values, their core beliefs, perceptions, and self-sense and relationship with others, to name a few, has been transformed. So some of the key traits that are likely to assist with post-traumatic growth, right? So these are things that sort of are connected with the ability to find growth after a traumatic, challenging event, okay? So some of them are optimism, conscientiousness, agreeableness, self-awareness, and extroversion. And let me just really quickly kind of hit on them. So optimism, right? That's confidence about one's goals. Expected outcomes are going to be good, right? Rather than sort of that or it's always going to be bad. They have a sense of, hey, things are going to work out okay. They don't always, but my intention is for them to work out okay. Conscientiousness is about being organized, careful, disciplined. So people who are of those kinds of characters tend to get a good growth after a challenging situation. Also an agreeableness, and what I mean there is sort of a empathetic or trusting, helpful nature. People who volunteer, for example, or help people who are physically or emotionally or because of age, unable to take care of themselves, like helping seniors or something like that nature. People who do those kind of altruistic things as a matter of course tend to have an outlook that enables them to find growth and resist some of the negative that conflict challenges, and also, of course, difficult situations might bring on. Also, self-awareness, imagination, experimentalism, and independence, the ability to dream. Readers score very high in these kind of things. For example, historical fiction or fiction. Some people say, well, it's a waste of time, but it's actually a really great thing because it helps us to imagine different outcomes, different situations. And the last one, extroversion. And I don't mean this about, the guy who's the life of the party and all that sort of stuff. What I'm really referring there is the ability to be sociable in a sociable setting, to be fun-loving, to appreciate, to be affectionate, and again, the right setting, right? So those are kind of key traits. So some of these traits can work into best practices, right? So best practices here, I would suggest, are things like getting to know yourself. I know this sounds probably ridiculous because you've lived your life with yourself. But if you really stop and think about it, how well do you actually know yourself? What do you like and why? What don't you like and why? We probably know the first half of that question really great. I know I don't like raisins, for example. But when I ask myself why, it's like I really have to scratch my head a little bit and think. So getting to know yourself is really great. So once you do that, you can try adding something you like and removing something you like each week in your life. So for example, if you decide that, hey, you really love soaking in a hot bubble bath, I don't know, first thing that came to mind, and you never get a chance to do that, and you hate doing dishes because everybody leaves the kitchen the minute dinner's finished, why don't you set up an opportunity to go cocoon yourself in the bath for 30 minutes and have someone else, your partner or another family member, for example, look after the dishes. Get rid of something that you don't like and add something you do like. And I'm sure you can think of many, many other examples when you start asking yourself those questions. What do I like and why? And what don't I like and why? Another good practice is to create a purpose or find a mission in life that goes beyond one's own self. Now, what do I mean there? Things like volunteering or helping others or just finding your own niche, right? There's lots of opportunities around us here, out Can, anywhere around the world, really, to care for others. And it's that altruistic giving that is really the key here as well. And it doesn't have to be a lot of time. It doesn't have to take up much of your time, but the sense is that you want to give to others. And this is also a really great practice. Also, you can develop and deepen a meaningful relationship with meaningful people, right? So there are people in our lives that we are close to by nature, we're sharing our lives with, and there are other people who are tangential. And a lot of times in our modern world, we tend to spend a lot of time on Facebook and other such social medias, but we are not spending that quality with the people that we have meaningful relationships with. So try to develop those and deepen them, make them richer and more meaningful. Another great best practice is to try to see new possibilities in life. What if? In the military, we always ask, so what? But I think a really great life question is, what if? So think about that and, what if this? What if that? Scenario, think of different possibilities that could come through to any situation, no matter how challenging or not challenging they may be. Connect with and develop your sense of personal growth. This is really great, your sense of personal growth and strength. What are your strengths? I mean, I know I get through a day, I know I do my thing, I know I do all this sort of stuff, but what are my strengths? This is something you really sit down and got to think through, maybe in that hot bubble bath, for example, and think about what are the strengths that I bring to this world, to this existence, to my life and to others. These are reassuring, positive things that will help us to build this sort of psychological toolbox that enables us to have the interest, the ability, and the wherewithal to find growth out of challenging situations and to not be pulled down in a very long and debilitating way. Now, I just want to clarify here. I'm not saying that any of this will make bad things in life go away. I'm not saying that there won't be challenges, and I'm not saying there won't be traumatic events, whether they're emotional or physical. They're going to happen in life. Life is like that. This is not what that's about. This is about going through those situations, those dark and sometimes very troubling situations that we all find ourselves in throughout the course of life. And getting through that because you know that the sunnier days, the brighter days are somewhere out there. But I just want to clarify that this is not going to make it go away. But just like working a muscle with exercises, right? So that if you work out on a regular basis, you, for example, when you have to run somewhere really quick, or you have to do something of physical nature really quick, you may feel a little achy afterwards, but because you work out on a regular basis, you're not quite as achy. Sort of like that. All right. So the last thing that I would say too is begin a gratefulness practice. This is something really important. You can keep a journal if you like. I hate journaling personally, but you can keep a journal if you're the kind of person who likes that. Or maybe a daily aphorism. Or simply just look yourself in the mirror when you're brushing your teeth and tell yourself that you are grateful for so-and-so. That you are grateful for the good things in life, that you're grateful for yourself being a good person, for whatever it is that you're grateful for. It's just a way of realizing and reaffirming to ourselves that we are good people trying to do good things. And sometimes we don't hear that enough, and sometimes we don't hear that enough from ourselves. So I think the time to start really building up that sort of growth muscle, if I could say it that way, is not when you're in a crisis, not when you're facing challenges and situations head on. It's time to build our resilience now, and our resilience by planting a little small seed of hope, growth, support will enable us to be more willing to harvest the growth in traumatic, challenging, and difficult times. Thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you in future Chaplain Corners.